Okay, so this is part 2 of the Game Boy project, and we're going to get this into Ventuz. So the idea is to get our model out of here and get this interactive in real time, add some lighting, maybe you want to tweak some of the materials so that, and we're going to jump straight into it. So here's a quick preview, just a really simple scene. As you can see, there's nothing fancy about it, but we've got some interaction. You can see there's lighting and shadows and depth of field, and it's reacting to the mouse, and we've got some video playing. So I'll show you how I created this, and getting the assets in from Blender into here. As you can see, so I can move this camera and adjust it. Let's get started. So I'll close this, I won't save it, I'll just showing you an example of what you want the end thing will be, and we'll recreate this. So with Blender, you want to, the first thing with properties when you're exporting your objects, like I said before in the first video, if you didn't watch the first video, is when you're exporting, you export as a GLTF file. Sorry, there you go, I got it right. Under geometry, make sure you apply your modifiers, because if you don't, like stuff like bevels or solidifies or whatever you use won't apply. So make sure you apply the modifiers and then they'll apply. Also, where it says include anything that's selected, so that you want to export, and maybe you didn't want to export a specific model and you just want parts of it, make sure you have selected objects on. I've already exported this, as you saw ahead. I already have it ready, so I'm going to jump in. But you just choose a location where you want to export it to. I have a folder here, and I'll make these two files available. You'll find the download link for these models. So I decided to export the background and then the Game Boy itself separate, so two separate assets. But there you go. So let's jump into Ventuz. So we've got Ventuz ready, new empty scene, and we're going to just jump straight in, and we're going to drag our GLTF files in. So I'm going to drag the background in, the BG first, and as you can see, it's in the scene. I don't need the geometry import node in at the front now, and I'll rename this where it says scene to BG. Now I want to just kind of order the group a little bit. So I want to add an axis in here, and just stack all these spheres into one group and just rename these spheres. This just makes it easier. I mean, you can name this whatever you want or group them how you like. It's just to make it easier for myself. And I'm going to rotate this the Y 90 degrees, so now we're facing the same way as our Blender scene, because we was looking at it from the side. And next what I'm going to do is drag my Game Boy in. So I'm going to get the Game Boy, drop it in. I'm going to drop it under the BG group. There we go. And I can again delete the geometry import node, and you can see the Game Boy is in there, and we can rename that Game Boy. Now another lighting or cameras or anything's come through, and that's not a problem, because we're gonna add a camera now to the scene. So we're gonna go to the world tab. I'm gonna drop a camera at the top of our scene. Now you can choose how much field of view you want. I like to set this one for maybe 30. I'll adjust this or tweak it later, just to get us a little bit closer in. And of course you can move the Z position, to get a lot closer into the scene. So let's start off with making the interactivity. So let's just focus on the Game Boy itself. So if I zoom into these buttons here, so if I use the camera, and I'll just want to focus on that for now. So I'll just move these cameras, and we want these to be clickable. These two buttons to be clickable. So I'm going to open this, right click to collapse this, and go into the model. And you can see I already have button 1 named and button 2 named from Blender. So you can name each of your objects and the names will come through, so we know what our buttons are going to be. So what I want to do is grab a mover node, and we want to take the position of the the button, so the position, the axis, and we want to animate this. So if I drag this X value, as you can see, it says 0.8. So I said 0.87. If I said 0.87 as my max, 0.87, and then if I said when it's popped out, you know, something like 0.92, it'll be my min. So I'll take 0.92, and I'll just copy this mover because the button 2 will be the same, so I have 2 movers. But this one will be for button 1. If I take this X-axis and drop it on, you'll see the buttons going in and out, and it will just repeat because that's on a mover. And what I want to do is change the mode to one shot, and I'll do this one as well. I'll change this one to one shot, and might as well, while I'm doing it, just add the axis for the X, because right now it's the X. It might be different for you, but if you look at the Blender scene right now, so the way the model it was exported was, and I built it like this, is that the X, this is the X value as the Z. So that's why it may look a bit confusing, but it's just the way that the model's exported in the world. You can change this, I believe, in the world properties, so you can change this orientation here. However, I've just left it as default, so I haven't actually done anything. So that's why the X is actually, you know, it looks like it's the X from the Z depth. That's just the X position, okay? And we also rotated this 90 degrees. So if you was to, for example, look at it from the side, and then you go to the button, then that would make sense because the X value is going along the X, you know. Now, anyway, I'm gonna rotate this back now. There we go. So we got some kind of animation on our buttons. You know, they're pressing. When every time we hit nudge now, they react and they press in. So what I'm going to do is select these both and change the duration to something like 0.3, so it's a lot quicker. And we want to add touch buttons, so we're just going to go interaction, touch button, and I'm going to place a touch button on this one. You can name this BTN1, so you know what button that is. Going to be 4 and BTN2, button 2. Okay, so I'm going to select both of these and these two. And I'm going to place button 2 here and button 1 here. And I'm going to take the nudge and link it to button 1, single tap. And the nudge from there, button 2, single tap. Now, I can now click on the model. As you can see, it's reacting to my mouse clicks. So, you know, now I can interact with that. And if I choose to, like, for example, link it to a clip, or you know, or have it do something, or you know, a bit of text comes out, or whatever I choose to link to that button to, you know, have it control something else, you can do that. It's up to you entirely. There we go. So we got some basic interaction, nothing fancy, but we've got something really simple to get us started. You know, some simple interaction. So now let's zoom out. Let's pull the camera out. Here we go. So next, let's make this, you know, give it some lighting and stuff, because right now it's all very flat, as you can see, and there's nothing, you know, nothing very exciting, and we want it to look a bit more like our render, where it's looking nice here. So we kind of want to kind of recreate this kind of lighting effect. So let's jump in. So what we want to do is add a spotlight to our scene. Boom. I'm going to drop a spotlight in front of my axis of the BG, but it's covering everything else. And I'm going to turn on non-render objects. So non-render objects, so now you can see the light. So now I'm going to rotate this 90 degrees on the pitch and move this along in the X, as you can see, and the Z. There we go. There we go, and move this up just so I can light the actual main object. There we go. So it's there. If you do have issues, you know, moving this around, you can always do the in-edit render object mode, and then you can use the translate and use the arrows to move those as well. It's entirely up to you. I prefer using the actual you can change the gizmo size, like I forgot to say. So there you go, it's just a lot easier. But yeah, so it's entirely up to you. Like I said, I prefer to use, I'm used to using the values in the scene to to move these around and just turn the non-render object on so I can see the spotlight. But there you go, that's entirely up to you. The camera itself, I'm going to pull out a bit more so I can see the scene a bit more. It just gives me an overview of the scene, and of course I can pull this up and down. And we'll tweak the lights in a second. But what we want to do is create a plane to project, like to block out some of this spotlight, so we can create nice shadows on our object. So what we're going to do is get an axis, drop that in. I'm going to apply a solid color to it, and we want a rectangle. So the axis, solid color, rectangle. Now if I scale this up, we won't see it, so I need to rotate this. It's probably on the x-axis, there you go, and the y, and there's our plane. So this plane here, so I'm going to set that to 0 and set this to 90. There we go. So you can see this is the plane, and what we want to do is kind of project these wavy shadow lines, on our object. So the spotlight is only shining through, and then we're blocking out whatever we need. So we're going to apply a texture to this, a material, texture base, and I'm going to load in the texture. So I have this geometric texture, which is just this wheelie lines, and it's black and white. It's a solid texture. There's no alpha on it. It's just a black and white PNG or JPEG. And what I want to do is right click this and place clone, and on the base I want to say alpha. So now you can see, we can see through it. There's an alpha now. It has an alpha channel. So we just duplicated it and created the duplicate as an alpha channel. Now on the mapping here, I want to change on the alpha channel mapping. I want to say inherit from above, which will inherit the base one. And then again for the clamp and stuff, I want to change to inherit. So now when I change the base UV mapping, so I'm going to the UV 0 and change that clamp to wrap. Anything I do on the base will change the alpha underneath. So as you can see now, I can scale this up and down, and see the wavy lines. So what I'm going to do is just rotate this and make this point upwards, so 90 degrees up. And if I turn the bounding box on, so we can still see that's the plane, and I'll just call this shadow. So this is going to be our shadow. This is what projected in our shadow. So I'm going to move this up like this, just above the object. Now, because it's the lighting, it's I've decided not to change the draw mode to both sided, so I want it only one sided. So we just want to see the back face. We don't want to see the back face on this side, but we just have the front face of that rectangle, so the light's hitting it and it's not displaying anything. So right now you can see the light's going through and it's ignoring this plane, and it's nothing's happening. So the reason is this because we have shadows turned off. So what we want to do is go to shadows and turn shadow map on, and now you can see it's just casting a shadow of the whole rectangle. So we're going to need to go to our material on this and the shadow options here. So it'll be next to your standard, then you have shadow options. You want to go shadow options, and you want to turn off simple caster. And as you can see now, the light is coming through and it's shining, those little gaps of those swirly lines on our texture, on our alpha. And if I adjust the UV mapping on the scale, as you can see, the tighter I bring it, you can see the texture there, and it's starting to look really nice. Now of course I can rotate this. The cool thing is the reason I'm editing the UV is I can choose to move this position of this plane up and down which also has an effect of the shadows, but you know, it's easier for me to tweak this, you know, to get the look I want. And you know, I can stretch this out or tweak this texture, and it will still affect the shadows, but it will get, it's more, you know, I have a lot more control over how I want my shadows to look. So I want to try to create this kind of shadow like this. So you know, so if I want it to, you know, be more, you know, a little bit more tighter, you know, I can do that. It's entirely up to you. There you go. Let's tweak this. So let's reset this. Go. Scale this down a tiny bit, and I'm happy with that for now. It doesn't look fantastic, however, give it a second, you'll see in a second we'll make this look a million times more better. So in the shadow options, we do have a lot of options, you know, like you can change the, you know, the amount, so how's the opacity on that. But I'm going to change the resolution to like 4K. On the filter, I'm going to change this to 8 samples in the shadow. And then I just want to add some filter scale. So as I start to add the filter scale, increase that value, you'll see it starts to soften those shadows. You know, it starts to, and it's almost like a blurred soft shadow. So it's really softened, it's making this really nice and soft, you know, with the filter. And we will tweak that, but as you can see now, it looks a lot better. Don't worry too much about that. So there we go. So next we want to do is light the scene. So right now we're not using any high dynamic range lighting, so we want to turn this on. So we're going to go here on our 3D routes and make sure we go engine and turn the high dynamic range on. Right now we don't have any skybox, so we need to add a skybox. Now if you have your own skybox textures prepared, you can load them in, so you can drag a skybox into your scene and, you know, load the textures in. However, I'm going to use the built-in Ventuz example. So if I hit F1 on the skybox and under the interactive example, if I open this scene up, so if you click it, what you do, you can learn about the node itself, which is fantastic. Any node you click on F1 and you'll get information or help files and an example scene as well. But you can, what you can do is with these example scenes, it's fantastic, is they already have, some of these have textures or materials or, you know, parts of it that you can use in your own projects to save you time. So I can say, okay, I want to borrow this skybox, Control C, copy this, and I can jump to my tab on the scene and paste it into my scene. So now I can place this in front of the, say, my spotlight, as you can see, and now it's lighting up my scene, and I don't have to load in my own textures. If I do want to, I can just double click and load in my own textures. However, Ventuz have some, you know, a pretty good skybox texture, you know, to get you started. And you can see by me just adding that into the scene how much of a difference it made. By turning the engine to high dynamic range and adding the skybox, is kind of added, you know, overall lighting to the scene. However, you can see the spotlight is disappeared. Now the spotlight, we need to increase the gain on this now, so for us to see the spotlight better. So if I was to add, say, the gain to 10, now you can start to see the shadows and the light coming through. If I turn the non-render objects off, so you can see it without the wireframe, you can see it's starting to look really good. And I can increase this to 15, and you can see it's really powerful. So maybe 12. You know, it's about playing around, finding out what, you know, what setting you want. We can also go into our skybox here, and on each one, so the irradiance, you can change that exposure, so you can bring this down or up, entirely up to you. Or maybe you want to just change the specular. Again, you can change that specular and you just bring that exposure down, as you can see, and it has a nice effect to it anyway. So let's zoom in, let's bring this closer in, and here you might want to adjust the shadow blur on the filter, you know. So I'll reduce those filters, as you can see. There we go. So I'll just, you know, it doesn't have to be massive, just to make it, you know, look a little bit nicer. I might even tweak that anti-aliasing, but yeah, to me that looks pretty good. And if I want at any time, I can, you know, tweak those shadows. It's entirely up to you. You know, there's no, you know, law or what it should look like. You know, it's fantastic. There we go. This. Okay, so I'm gonna add a backlight in here. So, sorry, I could be here all day tweaking the colors and materials and everything. Anyway, but I'm gonna just add a little point light into scene. So I'll drop a point light in, turn my non-render objects on, so I can see that. And as you can see, I can position this at the back, increase that gain. So now you can see I've got a backlight. There it is there. It's really, really powerful, so I just put that to 60. Now I can bring this down, and it's down here, you know, and light this from the bottom, and you know, change that specular, maybe reduce the specular to black and change this color. You can add some, you know, add some backlight there, and it just looks, you know, just adding more to it, it just starts to look really good. Right now the camera, like I said, you'll probably want to bring this a lot closer in, and then because I have the spheres now, I can position these back in the world and move these around, you know, to fill it in, or I can duplicate these and have more as well. Entirely up to you. So these materials as well on the sphere, like if you did, for example, want to make these you know, more glossy or more chrome like, or less rough or more rough, let's find, where is this one? Is it this one? This one here, for example. If I click on its material, you can change the roughness, as you can see, and you know, if I want it really like a chrome ball, of course, just changing the roughness can do that, or maybe I don't want it to be a chrome ball and you know, it's really rough. You know, you can play around with those materials. I won't go too much into it. If you want to, you know, try to replicate that roughness, you can, or what you can do is, I did another video on PBR materials where you can actually bake this the same properties, so the roughness and everything as a material, and then import it into Ventuz as well. So then it will, you know, you just have your roughness maps and your specular maps and everything that you can import in. Anyway, I want this right now is a bit boring. It's very static, you know, nothing's happening. So talking about materials, let's go to the Game Boy and add something on our screen, because right now it's flat. So if I go to my screen material and go set this to no light and change the color, base color to white, so I'll just reset that to white, and we're going to add a texture with a base. Now the UV mapping, I did, as you noticed if you've watched the first video, I didn't do any UV mapping on it. However, in Ventuz you can change the UV mapping. So if I load in a video clip and set this to loops, set the clip loops, if we go back here to the UV mapping, here, you know, you can change that UV mapping and correct it. So if you haven't done your UV mapping, you know, you do have the ability to correct your UV maps or tweak the UV maps in Ventuz as well. So you can go back into Blender, do the UV mapping and then import it in with the correct UVs, which will save you the time, you know. So you make sure your objects are already, you know, well prepared, you know. It depends on what you want to achieve or how you're trying to achieve it. But yeah, I mean, you can go in and tweak that and fix the UVs on there, as you can see, as I'm doing here. But yeah, I mean, really straightforward. Now we have some, you know, we have some video player here, and we've got this interactive buttons. If I want some more movement, and it looks very static. So next, what I want to do is go to I want this, maybe perhaps I want these spheres in the Game Boy to move with the mouse, or depending where the user's position is. So what I can do is go to the IO tab, and I want to get the mouse's position, for example. So this is the mouse, window mouse, and we know from 0 is the center, and if I look at the clip X on the outputs, it will be -1 to the left and 1 to the right. So it's -1, 0, 1, and it goes the same for the clipped Y. The way it works it out is 0 is the middle, 1 is the top, and the bottom is -1. So I can convert these values to maybe make the actual object tilt towards the the users where they're interacting with on the screen, and this moves around. So I need another axis, for example, or if I drop this into an axis, all these into an axis, and I'll keep the background separate, and I want the Y, for example, to move with the mouse. So what I'm going to do is take the Y rotation and say, well, on clipped X, as you can see now, as I move it, it's taking that value. However, I want it a bit more. I want to add a lot more, I don't want it just to be -1 to 1. So what we're going to need to do is go to Logic, Maths Effects, and we're going to add a clipping node in between. So as I drop that in, and I call this Clip X, you can name this Clip X. Here, my input, we know the minimum is -1 from the mouse node that's inputting into there, and what we want to output actually is, well, when I'm over here to the when I'm at -1, I want this to maybe tilt a lot more towards the left, so when I'm over here the left side of the screen is to the left, and when I'm over the right I want it to tilt to the right, and which will be my out, so it should be here. So now if I go from right to left, you can see now the object follows it, which is really cool. And now because I have those spheres in there, the background, I could have a lot more of these in here, or I can adjust these. Oops, wrong one, but let me put this back in the center. So these spheres here, I can maybe move these across a bit more, or bring them close to the object, and reset that. There we go. It's here. I can move these in the scene. There we go. And of course I can duplicate this and have another set of spheres on the right. So I'm going to duplicate this and move this over here. Perhaps I'll move this over here so it's smaller. Yeah. So I always have something in the background. Right now they look very the same, so maybe I'm just going to rotate this. Okay. It doesn't matter, to be honest, but there you go. You can you can design this however you like. Put some over here. So we've got something always in the background, and it's just a bit more interesting. I can keep on tweaking this all day. There we go. Until you're happy with it. Anyway. And now I want to do the same for the y-axis. So as I move up and down, I want this to react as well. So again, we want the rotation X, for example. Perhaps it's the rotation X or the Z. Let's see. Let's say the Z, but with the Z axis. You may have noticed that I actually moved the shadow plane in, and I accidentally grouped the shadow plane in here. And I don't want that to be grouped in here, so I can just take this out of the group. There we go, and that won't affect it. Anyway, so now I can rotate this, and the shadows, the light will stay in the same place. And I only want this to move, so what I want is take the Z axis and say clipped Y. So now if I add the clipping node again, Mass Effects, clipping node, in between. I'll rename this clip Y, so this is a clip of Y, and again -1, and we know the top, at 1, perhaps it's tilted like this, and when I go to the bottom of the screen, it's more like this, you know. And then when I choose to interact, so I can still interact with it, and then, you know, I could maybe the user's touching something over here, and, you know, the object's, you know, orientating towards them, or if they're here, and, you know, it's just facing them wherever they are on interacting with the screen, it's following the mouse. And, you know, you got some nice lighting and interesting background, and, you know, some parallax going on. You can of course change those background colors as well, like that backstage. You know, maybe you don't want it to be blue. You know, maybe you want it to be purple, orange, green, whatever you want. There's no law on what the colors are. You can change those in real time, which is fantastic, right? You know, you don't have to render this out. It's just there. It's there in real time. Now let's add some depth of field in this scene. And you may notice that when the mouse leaves the screen, it's very snappy. So I'll also just move this across the screen, and it looks very snappy as a drag along. So what I can do is actually smoothen this out before we do the depth of field stuff. So let's smoothen this out by adding some damping using an oscillator perhaps, or you can use an ease. I mean, you have ease dampers, linear, ease morph. You got loads of options. I'm going to use the oscillator. I like the oscillators. These are one of my favorite ones, and I'm going to place these in between the axes and the clipping nodes. And by changing, if I select both of these, I can change them both at the same time. Set them to like something like 10. You can see now as I go off the screen, it's not snapping, and it's a lot smoother. It has some bounce to it, so it's, you know, and it's looking a lot smoother. You know, it's got some nice bounce. And if I change this to 12, you know, add more dampening, it just looks, you know, you can tweak that and you can increase that. If you want it to bounce more, of course you can do 6 for example, and you'll see it's a lot bouncier. It's entirely up to you the look you're going for, rather than just being a snappy, you know, interaction when you're moving the mouse on the screen and off the presentation or in the presentation. You know, it's just a lot more, you know, more fluid. There you go. So that's one thing. Let's add some depth of field, like I said we was going to do. So I'm going to click on our node here. We're going to click on also our 3D root at the top, and we're going to change the depth of field. I'm going to turn on the fast depth of field, and I'm going to say show focus plane. This is a fantastic tool, you know, changing that the show focus plane. And then you can of course change also not the focus range, the distance, which should move the plane. And I only want this object, for example, in focus. So now if I turn the show focus plane off and then increase that the blur, so the far blur, so you can see I've blurred the background now, and you know, it's just looking more, you know, a little more interesting. You know, we've got some depth of field, and of course I can bring some of these forward if I move this forward, as you can see, like this. There we go. Perhaps like this. You know, I can adjust this scene as it is. You know, and it just looks more interesting. So there's something going on, you know, and you can see it's reacting. And maybe I'll push it a tiny bit back. I don't want it like, there we go. And we've got this cool little interactive scene. You know, we've got some nice depth of field, we've got some video playing here, we've got some nice lighting going on, we've got some interaction, you know, so we kind of built everything from scratch in the 2-part video. But hopefully that was useful. You can, again, like I said, play around with, go through and change all your materials, change all your lighting. You know, don't feel that you have to follow along 100%. Like I said, you can go in and change the colors. Maybe you want it to be purple, maybe you want it to be, I don't know, yellow. Entirely up to you what color scheme you choose to go with, or what, you know, what you create. It can be a completely different product or model. Yeah, but it's just an idea, just show you how you can use some of these you know, tools and stuff, and you can create pretty cool, you know, scenes, you know, that look, you know, really good quality for a short time. there's a lot more tweaking you can do, like I said, and you know, and you can do. There's no, you know, there's no saying you can't do that. You know, you can get the quality up a bit even more. You can even add ambient occlusion on. I haven't turned that on. So I can turn screen space for ambient occlusion on. As you can see, it adds a lot more to the model. You know, just that little bit of shading on there. And you got bloom and stuff as well, bloom, and of course you got all your post effects. So yeah, you got bloom here, so I can just say, you know, increase that diameter or whatever, and then bring that threshold down, whatever, and the gain down. You know, you can add so much to this. I'll go here to post effects. Go to on my actual layer. I can go here and add post effects. Maybe I want to add some distortion, and like I always add the barrel. You get the idea, but you can, you know, you can add all kinds of crazy effects on there as well. You know, you can stack these effects as well. You know, maybe you want to add some mosaic. You know, it's very random, but I mean, you wouldn't really want mosaic, but you can if you want. There's no one saying you can't. You know, say I want to personalize it. You know. And you get a completely different look. It's a different art style, but it looks cool, right? But yeah, you know, you can stack these layers and you can do all kinds of crazy stuff. You maybe want to do feedback delay, you know, and you got this kind of trippy interactive effect. You know, it looks like you know, got this kind of weird effect, but it's kind of cool. Anyway, thank you again. Don't forget to hit the like, share, subscribe. We're trying to hit 1k subscribers. You know, trying to hit that target. Thank you again. I'll try to keep up with making more content, you know, in my free time. Bye bye. Oh yeah, also like share what you do. You know, I want to see what other people create. If you do create something, or you know, please share it in the links below. You know, it'd be good to see if anyone's using or creating stuff. Thank you again. Bye bye.